Hi everyone, I'm Casey Frashante. I'm a professional astrologer, and today I wanted to take a look at Gypsy Rose Blanchard's chart, just because, today I was meant to actually do a video on Jodi Arias and Travis Alexander's synastry, but I don't know, I woke up kind of like sad today. The weather's really nice outside. There's no reason I should feel sad, and I've had two full sugar Dr. Peppers, and I'm just not feeling particularly solar. So I wanted to incorporate some kind of solar essence kind of chart into today's video. And so I was looking at Gypsy's chart. She has a Leo sun. I'll get into all of that later. And then I was kind of looking at her transits, progression, solar arc directions around the time of what she did to her mom. And I don't really feel like talking about the transits and the progressions and stuff like that. I've done that in previous videos, but I the her solar arcs were really loud to me, and her solar return for that year was actually really cohesive. And I haven't spoken about solar return charts yet, and so I wanted to kind of do that today. But we're gonna need to start off looking at Gypsy's chart, and I should probably mention what her deal is. Gypsy Rose Blanchard was she was a victim of Munchausen by proxy, which is essentially when you have, I guess, kind of like a caretaker, but I don't think it has to necessarily be that. It's when someone else has Munchausen's and you have it by proxy. So Gypsy Rose Blanchard's mother had Munchausen's, um, which is essentially kind of, I think it's kind of like an attention personality. So I'm not a psychologist, I could be wrong, but essentially Gypsy's mother made Gypsy out to be this kind of uh, like sick, injured person, and Gypsy's mum benefited from that in like social standing, money. They got a lot of money from like government grants and donations and things like that, and it turned out to all be a farce. And Gypsy wasn't sick, she wasn't disabled, she was perfectly fine at home. And Gypsy kind of just went along with her mother's lies and story because this is how her mum made her money. Like her mum didn't work, they made their money, made their income through scamming people essentially. And but before, and Gypsy ended up, um, murdering her mother. And before this happened, Gypsy was already kind of, I don't want to say famous, but kind of like a local celebrity in a lot of ways. There's um, footage of her at all these kind of like, I don't want to say like upscale events, but these kind of like these events, people would go to charity events, fundraisers, things like that. Gypsy would be kind of like a spokesperson there, and her mum as well. Um, and there's footage of her at these like in like news interviews, and I think at one point Gypsy won like a an all expense paid trip to Disneyland or World, one of them because I guess they kind of convinced one of these charities that Gypsy was going to be dead in a few years, which again wasn't the case, and this was going to be like a final, like, wish fulfillment, something like that. So they were already kind of in public sphere, and then Gypsy did what she did, and then the infamy around her kind of blew up, and she's out of prison now. I think she was in prison for maybe like 8 years, something like that, and she's out of prison now. She's, as far as I can tell, kind of like an influencer. She makes videos on TikTok or something, and so yeah, so that's kind of the gist. There is like a lifestyle, is that what it's called? Like a lifestyle documentary kind of thing about her life story. Sorry. Um, but yeah, so if you want to learn more about it, just watch videos on YouTube or just look up whatever the TV series about Gypsy's life is. I remember watching it a few years ago. It was actually, quite insightful. But let's just get started by looking at Gypsy's chart. Okay. So I always like to start with the sun. Um, the sun, the sign it's in, the house it's in, and any aspects that it's making. So Gypsy has this really strong sun in Leo in the 10th house, and the sun is kind of, it's the most like external and visible part of our personality other than the ascendant. The ascendant is the personality. The sun is just the core identity of the person. I like to refer to it as kind of like it's the like cardboard cutout of the person. Is you can see it, you can see it very clearly. If you're kind of at a party, you can kind of spot who the water signs are and who the fire signs are because fire sign sons are going to be very much concerned with gaining some kind of attention. They're typically going to have a louder personality. Externally, I'm not talking about personality in the sense of the ascendant, which is literally the person. This is just again, it's the most kind of I don't want to say surface level, it's the most apparent, and it's very much concerned with the path someone is on in this life. You know, water signs, for example, water sign suns, they're going to be, generally speaking, more withdrawn. And again, I have a Cancer sun and a Aries ascendant, so you need to kind of uh, understand the nuances that come along with that. So I can come off as kind of more forward than a typical kind of Cancer, but that doesn't change the fact that if I was at a party, I'm probably going to be kind of off to the side, engaged in kind of a more intimate kind of conversation with someone, whereas someone like Gypsy, Sun in Leo in the 10th house, is going to be um, the life of the party, for lack of a better term. She's going to be very loud and is going to actually demand a lot of attention, just because she does have her sun opposite Saturn, and the opposition is an aspect that is always worked out in relationships. And so this is kind of, I have the sun sextile Saturn, for example. I feel kind of confident in the road that I'm on in life. It's just kind of there's a certain reality factor there for me where I'm kind of like, okay, this is my life. Uh, I don't particularly um, put too much emphasis on how others perceive me. Again, the sun is very external. It's very much about others' perception of you. I feel secure in my identity. I suppose, yeah, I feel secure in my identity. Gypsy is someone that doesn't feel secure in her identity. The opposition is an aspect worked out in relationships. So there's going to be a lot of, the sun in Leo is a very kind of demanding placement to have in general, and in the 10th house, it's leaning into um, the 11th, just because it's within 5 degrees of the um, degree on the 11th house cusp. It's just kind of like, let me look at my notes. Um, so what she was meant to be working out in this lifetime and learning about and developing, she was meant to be developing the skills to get noticed. And again, we're going to want to focus on higher vibration keywords when we're talking about the sun, not in aspect to Saturn. I kind of jumped the gun there a bit early. Just sun in Leo in the 10th, leaning into the 11th. This is someone that should be developing the skills to get noticed in a healthy way, expressing herself publicly, healthily, um, becoming some kind of figurehead. I was going to say celebrity, figurehead or celebrity. This is very kind of um, publicly orientated personality that wants to shine and get attention. Um, But with the opposition to Saturn, this is someone that can feel a lot of kind of projected insecurity. And what I mean by that is it's not like the square aspect. This is someone that would actually genuinely feel very insecure. The opposition is going to be someone that feels more secure when they're alone, for example, and then when other people come into the picture, then they feel insecure. They tend to compare themselves to others, and then that makes them feel insecure. She's someone that, generally speaking, on her own, typically not totally insecure. As soon as other people enter the picture, suddenly becomes very insecure. I think it's Sue Tompkins. She says that you know, the Sun and Saturn hard aspect says, all Sun Saturn aspects kind of say, notice me. And, the Sun Saturn in hard aspects is kind of like, notice me. People usually don't. So she was trying too hard to get attention, trying too hard to become a kind of public figurehead or celebrity. Because I mentioned in my Eric Harris video, like uh, serial killers or, criminals in this kind of era of our life in society and whatever, they kind of are exalted to the status of celebrities. They're on newspapers, on the television, um, and things like that. And so Gypsy kind of was a celebrity, like a local celebrity, and then after this happened, she became a global kind of celebrity. And now she's out of prison. She's on, TikTok, doing the influencer thing, um, whatever. It's just kind of like it's so interesting how these things kind of just keep showing up, not in astrology, but just in society. It's just, yeah. Um, uh, Again, the Sun in Leo wants their life and their story and their purpose to kind of be validated and be appreciated and noticed. Sorry if I'm like kind of distracted. There's a lot of noise going on outside, and I kind of need to like listen for something. Um, but on the positive-ish side, this is someone that's going to be very determined. The sun in Leo is happy that, Leo is ruled by the sun, and Saturn is also equally as strong. So, for example, if we were talking about a different, let's just say someone has sun in Taurus, Saturn in Scorpio, that kind of opposition, that's a kind of like a sour opposition, just because the sun isn't operating as its strongest. Saturn isn't either. But when you have the sun in Leo in its domicile, and then Saturn in Aquarius also in its domicile, because Aquarius is traditionally ruled by Saturn. This is a very kind of like strong, determined personality, and again, it's involving the axis with the signs, Leo and Aquarius, about self and society, and then also in the houses concerned with the public life and the private life. There's some kind of spark about her personality that's very much concerned with, how do I get attention? How do I feel appreciated? It's that kind of energy. And I don't put too much stock into Chiron, but I do look at it to see if it reiterates anything in the chart. And she has Chiron in Leo, conjunct the sun. And that to me would just say that this Sun Saturn opposition, which is difficult for anyone, this is really difficult for her. This is a real sore spot for her. Um, and there's also something kind of like very impersonal about her personality. Leo is very self-concerned. But having Sun in Leo in the 10th, leaning into the 11th, and it's opposite Saturn in Aquarius, this is someone that is just, her individuality is impersonalized. And I wonder if that has anything to do with like the celebrity, or the fact that she became this figurehead um, in a way that wasn't authentic to her, that wasn't even true. It was all based on a lie. Just, yeah. Um, and then she has her moon in Aquarius in the fifth house. And this is someone that is, I don't want to say they're not in touch with their feelings, but they need time to process their feelings. Uh, they operate on like an emotional intel kind of way. It isn't um their feelings aren't necessarily instinctual. They kind of just, they need to, yeah, they process how they feel. And they need emotional attachment. The moon is a lot of about what we need to feel safe, and how we operate in private, how we are at our core. And this is someone that doesn't like the emotional um connection, doesn't need it as much as other people do. This is someone that needs the distance, emotional distance. Again, going back to that sun opposite Saturn, this is someone that doesn't feel good enough, and is kind of constantly very needy for attention. And then the moon in Aquarius is kind of detached from all of that. So it isn't kind of like this desperate kind of instinctual need that she has to get attention or be famous, or whatever the story is with her. I don't particularly care. Um, it's more so just like there's this real just like detachment and separation from like the journey that she's on in this life, and how she's supposed to feel about it. Again, it can kind of go back to the story with her mom, how her mom was kind of like making her lie about her entire life just so they can get money, because it's a disorder that her mom had, and that kind of thing. So there's not a lot of what am I trying to say? It's just kind of, there's a real kind of unorthodoxy about her life, not just regarding her emotional nature, but about obviously high into it. There's just a real, yeah, unorthodoxy about her life and her life story, especially. Um, and then with the aspects that her moon is making, she's got it. Was it Jupiter? Again, another opposition. This is worked out in relationships. Um, and Jupiter just tends to amplify whatever it touches. Um, and so I've noticed that with Moon Jupiter aspects, there's a real, especially in opposition. Square, it's going to be more internal. This is someone that might just, there's a real hedonistic streak. Moon square Jupiter, for example, these are people that might, um, do drugs, for example, because they like the feeling. Moon opposite Jupiter is going to do drugs to please someone else. You need to look at the signs as well. Also, Jupiter in Leo, this is like a larger than life kind of placement. Moon in Aquarius, this is someone that doesn't have kind of any needs of their own, any feelings of their own. It's very much connected to other people and society. They're more concerned with the community and society than they are with their own feelings. And then, you have that in opposition to a larger than life personality. Do you understand the disconnect that I'm kind of feeling with her chart? It's kind of like she feels so much for, and I'm kind of just like hypothesizing, feels so much for, the general kind of societal collective, but then that Jupiter and Leo was kind of like me, 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 me. And it's, the moon is the feelings and, the very kind of personal part of her, which is concerned with society. And then Jupiter is kind of just this it's like an overlay of me, 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 me. And it's like again, her life could have turned out so differently. And these aspects that I'm talking about could have manifested so differently had she made different choices in her life, but she didn't. And I'm trying to kind of piece this all together with who she is now and what we know about her, and, what she did and everything. Yeah, Moon Jupiter are very hedonistic, hedonistic in Gypsy's case for attention with that Jupiter in Leo. And the moon in the fifth house as well is very much concerned with herself and, moon in Aquarius in the fifth house opposite Jupiter, doing what I want when I want, regardless of what anyone else has to say about it. Moon in Aquarius or Aquarius in general is a very rebellious kind of sign. It isn't concerned with, it claims to be very much concerned with society and yet kind of is totally contrarian and, kind of, bucks the system. And I don't want to say it's inconsistent. I would say it's consistently inconsistent. Aquarius is a fixed sign and it will just kind of do the opposite of what it's supposed to do just because it likes the drama and the chaos and it just likes shaking things up. And I'm not saying that people with Aquarius placements do this consciously. They're just kind of they're tapped into something different than most of us. It's something like that. I always say that people with, strong Aquarius or Uranian charts, they're just conduits for this kind of undercurrent that's happening in society. And they're the ones that typically kind of, I don't want to say get martyred, that's kind of like a watery term. They are kind of villainized in a certain way. What Gypsy did, and I'm not making any concessions for her, I'm not saying what she did was, good or bad. It's actually very complicated. But, what she did doesn't actually have much to do with how she felt. She was just a conduit for what other people in society were kind of feeling or needed to feel at that time. Again, I don't know if this is like a very common thing, at least in America. I feel like it's less so in Australia because Australia is more like there's much more government aid, I feel like, whereas in America, you kind of need to rely on the community. Um, yeah, so maybe Gypsy and this whole story was kind of like it brought to the forefront the fact that this is actually an issue that people suffer from, not just the individuals being Munchausen or the person suffering with Munchausen's, but also just the society and the pain that this can put on society and the fact that there are so many people that are genuinely disabled that they didn't get the money that Gypsy got. And, Gypsy wasn't even sick and she just kind of went along with it. And that money that she took, that could have gone to people in actual need, as opposed to her just kind of living out this delusional fantasy that she had of getting attention, going on a tangent. So, and again, Moon Jupiter, regardless of the signs, this is someone that's going to be totally avoidant of any kind of responsibility. And I'm not saying these to kind of like, if you have these aspects, you're a bad person or anything like that. These are hard aspects that I'm talking about. This is often how it's manifested. And in Gypsy's case, I don't particularly care if she gets offended about what I have to say about her chart. I also don't particularly care if someone watching this video gets offended, but I don't want you to kind of have that in your mind of like, I'm trying to offend you. I'm just talking about how the extremes of these planetary interchanges can manifest. And I'm sure plenty of you, if you're watching this and you have hard aspect that I talk about, you can kind of go, yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, so, Moon Jupiter is, totally avoidant of responsibility. Jupiter is kind of like, in a way, it's kind of the antithesis to Saturn, but so is Uranus in a way. And so you have this kind of the moon in Uranus, which is the antithesis to Saturn. And then you also have Jupiter, kind of like, it's not like an antithesis, it's just kind of like, it's like an opposite, but it's not that extreme as an opposite. It's kind of like, I don't really know how to explain it. Saturn is restriction, Jupiter is expansion. It's that kind of thing. But in astrological myth, I don't think they're kind of butting heads that much. They're kind of like two ships passing in the night, as far as I'm concerned. But Moon Saturn people are going to be very much concerned with duty and responsibility. Moon Jupiter is going to be avoidant of that and have um, these kind of these extreme kind of emotional reactions to things. They have no emotional restraint. Um, and I also wanted to say that, Moon Jupiter can actually be, like, especially in the signs that they're in. Um, if they weren't in these signs, I don't think I would actually say this, but Jupiter and Leo, again, like larger than life. Um, Moon in Aquarius, like, I am so concerned with society. I don't have any needs. It's very bohemian. It's kind of like a hippie-ish kind of aspect to have. But then again, it's kind of like, people are people, and people have different personalities. People are typically kind of like selfish, and they don't, Moon Jupiter is Moon Jupiter as well. They can kind of like, they're not really they they it's ironic, but they kind of miss the bigger picture a lot of the time, because they're so concerned with feelings of the moment, um, that they miss the bigger picture. So, uh, because I say that's ironic because Jupiter is about the bigger picture, but the moons are so like instinctual that Moon Jupiter a lot of the time misses the bigger picture because they're so focused on their needs. Um, and yeah, because you know how I said like Jupiter kind of just expands on what it touches. Moon Jupiter interchanges can have that kind of polarity that I said about like avoiding responsibility and whatnot. The Jupiter is also just going to amplify the qualities of the moon, which would be in Aquarius someone that is kind of um, all-knowing, I should say. Aquarius is an air sign. It's about intellectualism and being the last air sign. It's concerned with these kind of like large scope, visionary ideals, and so there is a real arrogance, in my opinion, to this opposition regarding these planets, and it's kind of like Gypsy in a lot of ways might feel like she. And I wanted to touch on Saturn as well. I think this is probably a good time to introduce this. So she has Saturn in Aquarius, and it's retrograde, and it's in her fourth house. And so, Saturn in Aquarius, this is, and also it's leaning into a fifth house as well. Um, this is someone that's going to be kind of socially, because we're talking about Aquarius, socially and romantically, fifth house, domestically, because it's in the fourth house, socially, romantically, domestically isolated. And this is so kind of obvious with what we know about her life and her story and whatnot. Um, Someone that's going to be typically very aloof. Saturn has a lot to do with fear, but it's also our mastery. And so she's kind of someone that is scared of being alone, but is also sorry, um, scared of being alone, but is also socially very kind of like masterful in the way that she's able to connect with a lot of people all at once. So there's that kind of like dichotomy in her personality. And again, we see that with the sun and Saturn, wanting to shine so brightly, but also feeling very insecure. The moon opposite Jupiter, kind of, I care for everyone, but then also I'm the special one. And then, Saturn and Aquarius in retrograde and everything like that. Sorry, I have lost my train of thought from my distraction. Someone that is totally kind of aloof, but also very much kind of like so self-involved that they're able to kind of appeal to a large audience. It's kind of weird to explain like that. Uh, Saturn and Aquarius as well, there can be a real trouble with expressing their ordinariness, because Aquarius is actually the sign of being ordinary. It's about every Tom, Dick, and Harry on the street. And so, Saturn being fear and limitations, there can be a sense of, again, you'd think Saturn and Leo would have this issue, and it can, but it's in a different way. Saturn and Aquarius is much more about, I need to be special because I'm too scared to express the fact that I'm not special. And, in my opinion, everyone is kind of just, you can be special to the people in your life, but generally speaking, no one's actually that special. You're kind of just a sack of meat and everyone's trying to get through the day. Someone with Saturn and Aquarius wouldn't think like that. They would think, but I am special. I have to be special because I'm so scared of not being special. Um, uh, and with it being retrograde, there's a lack of social and group connection, even though she's really good at it. This is this weird dichotomy that she has. It's like, and again, I'm not a psychologist or anything like that, and I don't want to say she's like a psychopath or a sociopath, but that's kind of what it's giving. It's giving someone that is so, and again, you wouldn't, like, you might look at her chart and say, there's not really that much here that says she's a liar. But there kind of is when you consider the fact that there's just this celebrity kind of figurehead, and then this really detached personality behind the veneer. It's kind of creepy. Um, Again, not like I'm saying she's creepy or people with these aspects are creepy. It's just that kind of tone to a chart is kind of creepy, and it's even creepier given that we know what she did. Um, and yeah, so there's just that kind of thing going on, and I just wanted to weave her Saturn interpretation into that. But she also has her moon square Pluto, and people with the moon in hard aspect to Pluto are people that are they feel like a lot of the times that their emotions are going to kind of eat them alive. It's either they need to operate in the moon space or the Pluto space. And again, the moon in Aquarius feels like they don't have any emotions of their own because they're so concerned with everyone else. Um, and so it's kind of like she represses her emotions so much that there's no real emotion there. And I wonder if there is like any kind of concern or emotion for society as a whole. You'd think that Moon and Aquarius would care about society, but Pluto kind of kills what it touches, especially in a hard aspect. So Pluto squaring the Moon in Aquarius, um, and again, Pluto is what you value. Sorry, the second house is what you value. She has Pluto in the second house, and so this is someone that is going to value again in Scorpio as well. Scorpio has a lot to do with other people's resources, and we know that she was essentially a thief of money. Um, this is someone that values other people, Scorpio's resources, um, and with it being Pluto again, these are extreme resources. These aren't. This isn't just kind of like a car or clothing. This is like banks money, charities money, big donations, and again she also has, you know, this T square going on, but Pluto Jupiter again it's amplifying the Pluto kind of um the Pluto qualities of it being big money. This is big money. This isn't just some assets here and there. The Pluto in the second house is the valuing of these huge assets. I don't even know how much money they got. I know they got a house. That's kind of spoken about in the TV show or whatever. Um, but yeah, so I wanted to go back to the Moon square Pluto specifically. Um, they there's also kind of like a real fear of feeling like emotionally uh intruded upon and invaded, and especially if the moon is in something like Aquarius, which is it's so detached from feelings that if it feels like it's being forced to feel something, it can't stand that. And it like I wonder if this might actually have something to do with guilt. Uh I wouldn't Pluto I would kind of associate with guilt, Pluto and Saturn. It's kind of just like I think she had a real I don't think she feels guilt. Is what I'm trying to say. Um, yeah, I don't think she can actually feel guilt. I don't even know she's kind of consciously aware of the fact that she doesn't have feelings because I wonder if this kind of Jupiter and Leo because again she has like the Sun in Leo. She's very kind of um comfortable with that Leonian vibe. I wonder if that Jupiter and Leo, the larger than life personality and character, kind of overrides any feelings of kind of emotional disconnection that she has and overrides any kind of sense of guilt that she might have. I'm not really particularly seeing that um in a chart. And especially she's got this moon in Aquarius, but she also has Uranus, which rules Aquarius, conjunct the fourth house cusp, and the fourth house cusp is associated with the moon. So this is kind of like it's amplifying the moon in Aquarius um character of just emotional detachment, um this kind of weird, kind of like domestic upheaval, domestic crisis. And it's so obvious with how her life kind of, panned out and everything like that. But anyways, I need to move on. Um, so then I also wanted to talk about her ascendant and the ascendant ruler. She's a Libra ascendant, and she's got Venus in Virgo. And so this is someone that is kind of like they have kind of like an impossible checklist that they need to live by. Um, and Libra risings, they're very much concerned with other people, like I'm an Aries rising. I won't say I'm like totally self-concerned, but like I'm self-concerned enough that I can admit that I am self-concerned. But the Libra rising is going to kind of concede to what other people want, is going to go along with what other people want because they are about, pleasing other people. and with, Venus in Virgo, this is someone that's kind of going to be more relationally um, harmonious, but in a rational, practical kind of way. I'm not getting the vibe that this is someone that is actually concerned with relationships. Like I have written in my notes, um, somewhere like, concerned with relationship orientated, but relationships of what kind? Is it relationships that are going to benefit her practically? Because we're talking about, Virgo, and Virgo is a sign of service as well. Is it she's only concerned with relationships that are going to serve her in some way? And again, just because you might be, a Libra or Taurus rising and you have Venus in Virgo, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm saying this about you. Based on what we know about Gypsy's chart already, this is what like the vibe I'm kind of getting, concerned with relationships that serve her in some way. And um she's picking and choosing what she values. Venus is much about what we value, and what we love. Virgo is picking and choosing what we value, what we love, and Virgo is a mutable sign. It's very changeable. So she can kind of just reorientate herself to who she loves, what she values, depending on what is going to serve her the best. That's my opinion, on her chart ruler being in Virgo. Um, and yeah, so aspects that her chart ruler is making, it's conjunct um, Mars. These are people that are going to be very socially inclined. And again, just being a Libra rising is kind of enough for that. But when the ruler of the first and ruler of the seventh are together, yes, someone more so, it's kind of compounding that relationship kind of focus in a chart. Conjunctions a lot of the time are about focus. People that have a lot of conjunctions in their chart are very self uh, kind of like self-directed and focused in kind of achieving certain things. They're less concerned with um other people. People with a lot of oppositions are going to be more concerned with other people. People that have a lot of conjunctions, and I'm not saying she has a lot of conjunctions or anything like that. It's just that with the relationship planets being conjunct, relationships are a big deal to this person. Um, that regardless of if they have their first and seventh conjunct or if it's just Mars and Venus conjunct, it's saying the same thing. This is someone that is concerned with relationships. But then she also has her Venus trining Uranus. And just because it's a trine, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's good or bad. I always say there are aspects of acceptance and aspects of resistance. And Venus being in a soft aspect to Uranus is going to be easier than having it in the hard aspect. But because, Uranus is about freedom and Venus is kind of about love and relating. For example, this could be someone that just loves very openly. And generally, that's going to be a good thing. This is someone that is kind of non-judgmental with who they relate with, which again would be a good thing. But because Uranus is so self-directed and so is Venus, this can produce someone, even though it's a soft aspect, that is totally so self-concerned that consider other people they don't consider other people's feelings. They don't consider their relationships with other people. It's very much just kind of like they value their freedom so much. And ironically, in Gypsy's case, it's about domestic freedom as well. She was a prisoner in her own house for so long. It really doesn't surprise me that something like this would have happened. Um, did it have to happen in this way? No, she could have just stood up and walked out of the house. But I understand that like in an abuse situation, it's much easier said than done. But I don't think she had to go to the extremes that she went to. And this is what that Venus Uranus is kind of saying to me. It's like um so self-centered, so indifferent to not just consequences, but just indifferent to herself. Venus rules herself, that is her. There's a real just kind of like indifference there, and this kind of like God complex, devoid of any kind of consideration. It doesn't really matter um what happens because this is what I feel like doing. And again, it goes back to this moon opposite Jupiter, doing what I want because I feel like doing it. And the avoidance of responsibility, not really caring what happens because this is what I feel like doing. And you kind of see that in like the life. Is it a lifestyle show? I don't know. In the TV show that's kind of based on her life, she would, again, I don't know how much of this is like real or like dramatized or anything like that, but she would kind of just, she'd go to these conventions with her mum, and then she'd just run off with some guy, this Venus Mars conjunction, run off with some guy, and her mum's like worried sick, and I'm not, saying the mum was in the right or anything like that, because Gypsy was an adult, but it's just kind of like, just no consideration of consequences. Moon opposite Jupiter, especially in the signs that they're in, and then this Venus trine Uranus, it's kind of like, you know, I always see like the trine is like a faucet that's kind of um turned on to its maximum, and the water is just like just gushing out. That is how easily trines flow. Um, so there is this kind of like she's so soft, and I'm not saying this because I necessarily dislike her. I mean, I do dislike her, but this is just again, it's based on what I already know about her. Um, this is kind of where I'm getting this from. It doesn't have anything to do with like me and how I personally feel about her. It's just, Venus, Uranus, like I said, there can be good things because it's trine. There are good things that come with this aspect because it's Uranus, and Uranus is so black and white, and it's so shocking that there's not it really kind of like it makes the Venus kind of character so much more spikier than it needs to be. And so it's not super pleasant when you have these in aspect. I mean, if you are a Venus Uranus person and you find another Venus Uranus person, then this is fine. But again, when it comes to just general relating to other people, these people can be far too self-centered to kind of have any um steadily main depending on other aspects, like steadily maintained relationships because they're so concerned with themselves. And then I also wanted to comment on the fact that she doesn't have any water. The only planet she has in water is this Pluto and Scorpio. Um, and when you have one planet in one particular element and that's it, it sucks up a lot of psychic energy. And so with Pluto and Scorpio, there are going to be a lot of people, millennials specifically, that only have one planet. Again, depending on the time they were born, this might be the only planet they have in water. And so these are people that are very much concerned with other people's resources and money and, everything like that. And you kind of see that in a lot of millennials. They're very much concerned with what boomers have. And, Scorpio is very vindictive as well. And Pluto is very generational. There's a real kind of sense of um, hatred towards other generations and the wealth that they have that millennials missed out on. And I'm not picking sides or anything. It's just when you have only one planet and that planet is Pluto in one element, which is water, and that sign is Scorpio, it sucks up so much psychic energy that it's really difficult and painful for someone to deal with just because it's very hurtful in the sense that to look at what everyone else has and you don't have it and you kind of can't regulate it because that's the only planet you have in a particular element. It's just kind of this weird, like icky kind of like undercurrent thing. They have a millennial that has Pluto and Scorpio, has plenty of other water. They might feel um, less kind of like hurt. They've accepted the fact that they missed out on, the golden years of the 20th century and, everything like that. Someone with no water and Pluto is in the second house, especially in Scorpio, very much there can be a real kind of like hatred towards those that have more than them. Uh, and with Gypsy not having any water in her chart, this is kind of it's kind of going haywire. There's no she can't process it. Again, with this moon in Aquarius, Uranus conjunct fourth house, you can't process certain things. You can't process emotions. Again, not saying people with moon in Aquarius can't process emotions. Moon in Aquarius in a chart that lacks water definitely can't process emotions. People without any water in their chart, they process emotions like children a lot of the time because they don't understand their feelings. Water signs are about understanding feelings and feeling feelings and knowing what they feel like. But without water, you don't understand feelings because you don't know what feelings are because they're not operating in your psyche. Not like that's a good or bad thing, but lack of water, there's a real misunderstanding of feelings. And so you can kind of act like a child a lot of the time when you try to express yourself. Um, Especially with the moon in Aquarius as well. She can't read a room. Anyone with kind of lack of water, a lot of the times, isn't going to be able to read a room because reading a room is concerned with feelings. And like there are people, heavily watery people, that can walk into a room and immediately understand what's going on. Gypsy's not one of those people. Um, so yeah, Oh, also, no, potentially no real emotional connection to anything other than money. Water is about emotional connection. Again, Pluto in Scorpio in the second house, big like just emotionally connected to big money. Um, so yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to say about her chart. Um, and then I kind of wanted to touch on because you can't really look at anything else in astrology until you address the native chart of whoever you're looking at. You need to get like a real kind of basic understanding about the person. And so again, I feel better kind of like talking about astrology, but I didn't have a bad day. I just didn't feel very happy today. And so I was just kind of looking at stuff and like I didn't want to do like a huge kind of like you know, what's the word? Presentation on the transits that were happening when she did what she did to her mom. I just kind of wanted to go with what felt right. And I wanted to talk about a solar return chart. Um, because I haven't spoken about that. Oh wait, hold on. And so basically, a solar return chart is a snapshot of the sky when the sun, transiting sun, returns to its natal placement. So Gypsy was born with her natal sun at 4 degrees. I think it's 8 minutes of 4 degrees, 8 minutes of Leo. And so on this particular year, the year that she did what she did to her mom, when the transiting sun reached 4 degrees, 8 minutes of Leo, I do birth location. When it reached that spot, this is a snapshot of all the transits that were happening at that moment. And basically, so when you look at transits for the year, you can say Gypsy was going to have transiting Saturn conjunct her. Transiting Saturn would have made a conjunction to her descendant and ingress probably into her seventh house. When something is baked into the solar return chart, it kind of just okay because having Saturn conjunct your descendant once doesn't mean nothing, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it means that much. When it's baked into the chart like this, so we can see her descendant, solar return descendant, 10 degrees of Scorpio, 16 degrees of Scorpio, this is conjunct the descendant. When it's baked into a solar return chart like this theme becomes important. Um, Also, for example, on the day that transiting sun conjuncted her natal sun, there was a new moon this day. That becomes important just because she has the transiting moon um conjuncting her sun, because that happens. How often does that happen? Once a month? The transiting moon, yeah, the transiting moon, goes around the zodiac in every 28 days. So this doesn't mean the transiting moon conjuncting her sun doesn't mean anything. When it's baked into the solar return chart like this, it becomes important. So that's why I want to look at solar return charts because it's a really broad picture of the themes that are going to emerge in someone's life in a given year. And when you compare that to the bigger transits that are happening and progressions and solar arc directions and whatnot, it kind of it really helps clarify which themes are going to be important versus which themes are going to be less important. So I just wanted to kind of touch on a few things in a solar return chart. The most important, in my opinion, being this new moon. So the solar return chart, she has the moon conjunct the sun, that's a new moon. And new moons in a solar return chart or any chart are going to be really kind of, she's born with a full moon. I don't think I mentioned that. Not mathematically full, but she has a sun in Leo, a moon in Aquarius. These are people that are, when they're born, they're going to be like very kind of hypersensitive. What they want is very different than what they need. Again, Gypsy wanted to be a celebrity or felt like she wanted to be a celebrity, and yet her emotional nature was disconnected from um, what you kind of need to be a celebrity. You need to be very self-involved, and yet her emotional nature was disconnected from essentially everything, potentially everything other than money and her own kind of pursuit of pleasure, whatever that means to her. And so the sun, this new moon, so when she's born with this full moon, but it's kind of expressed differently in a solar return chart. And I'll talk about this more in depth in a minute. But this new moon energy is about, you know, starting something new. expressing herself in a new way. What she wants and what she needs for this year, it's only valid for a year. What she needs and what she wants are very much in line with each other. And the fact that she was born with the opposition of the moon and the sun, this is something she wasn't um she didn't operate like this naturally. If you were born with a new moon and you're very kind of self-concerned, but then in your solar return chart there's a full moon, you're going to be for the year more concerned with your relationships to other people or a parent or something like that. Um, and the fact that there's this conjunction to um Jupiter as well, amplifying that she has Jupiter in Leo natally, and this would have been conjunct her Jupiter. I mean, widely, but so this is her natal Jupiter. I think was it what is it? 19 degrees of Leo. But I've mentioned in my other videos, like I'm pretty generous with my conjunction, or just because they're speaking the same language if they're in the same sign. Um, so this is kind of just there's all this Leo, Jupiter, new moon, new beginning energy about her and her identity and her self-expression and um, her self-validation and everything like that. This was a year about Gypsy. You can tell that just by the new moon. This was about her being herself finally. Could we have predicted what happened, what she did to her mom? Probably not. I mean, a really, great astrologer, maybe, but this is just kind of we can tell this is Gypsy's year. This is something about Gypsy. This is not about her mom. This is not about how she's going to scam more people. This is about Gypsy and her soul evolution. We also have Saturn is conjunct her natal Pluto. Saturn is the sign of karma. And again, she has Pluto in Scorpio in the second house, manipulation of other people's values and finances and whatnot. Again, just because you have this placement, I'm not saying that about you. We already know this is true in Gypsy's case. So, this planet of karma conjuncting this planet that she has that was a really it not only is it the axis of a apex of a T square, it's also the only planet she has in a water sign. This is something big was happening regarding karma, regarding her Pluto placement and that T square. In my opinion, the T square that she has with the squares to Pluto and Pluto's placement and whatnot has to do with theft of money. That's my opinion. Theft of money, manipulation of other people's feelings, collective feelings, other people's resources, transiting Saturn, conjuncting that Pluto, setting off that T square, um, was her needing to face the karma of what she's been doing with her life. And again, I'm not saying she was like, she was a victim and she was also a perpetrator, and you can be both at the same time. And I'm not saying you need to feel sorry for her or that, her mom deserved it or, whatever opinion you want to make of it, you go right ahead. I'm just saying this is kind of that, and also, Saturn has a lot to do with like a reality factor and tangible results. And so this can be the tangible manifestation of her karma surrounding her entire life up until that point of theft of people's money and emotions and, everything like that. Again, it's not like this huge kind of transit that she was going through. Generally speaking, you might just say, oh, transiting Saturn conjunct your descendant is also going to be conjunct your Pluto. Yeah, no big deal. When it's baked into the solar return like this, because she has her natal Pluto at 11 degrees of Capricorn. I mean, natal, sorry, she has a natal Pluto at 17 degrees of Scorpio. So this is right on it. It's not, a few degrees away or 10 degrees away or anything like that. It's within a degree, baked into the chart. This becomes a big theme. She also had transiting Pluto, so her solar return Pluto conjunct her natal Uranus, which again, transiting Pluto conjunct her natal Uranus doesn't really mean much when it's baked into um, a solar return chart like this. It can be very important, especially when you consider that she has Uranus conjunct her fourth house cusp natally. So this is going to be, I always, for some reason, I've never heard anyone else refer to it this way. This is the feeling I get from Pluto Uranus aspects. It's kind of like a nuclear bomb. Like Pluto is like mass destruction. Uranus is about, electrical energy. And, I kind of just get the impression of a nuclear bomb. And so this is like, this transiting Pluto coming, it would have conjuncted her fourth house cusp is 6 degrees of Capricorn. So whenever Pluto went, something would have happened around, I don't know, my math isn't good when it comes to Pluto because it's, it's elliptical, but um, a few years before this, something big would have happened at Gypsy's home, um, versus when it conjuncted her um, Uranus at 10 degrees of Capricorn. This is like, it's just like, yeah, it's like a nuclear bomb going off, and this could just be the most kind of uh, ginormous manifestation of Gypsy finding her freedom and gaining celebrity and gaining notoriety and, gaining the attention that she was so desperate for. Um, this going on here could have been a catalyst for that, but that she had some other solar arcs that I wanted to talk about. This is kind of just like very kind of vivid in her solar return chart. She also had in her solar return chart, she has Uranus square her Venus. And so remember when I was talking about how she has the trine natally, which again is like kind of open love, non-discriminatory love. The square is going to be chaotic love life. Um, it's going to be the negative manifestation of the natal trine that she has. If I was to have, you know, transiting Uranus squaring my Venus, I don't have a Venus Uranus contact in my natal chart. If I had it baked into my solar return chart for the year, it would be more of just like a kind of circumstantial thing and not necessarily something that is important to my general psyche. But when it's an echo of a aspect you already have, it can become more um, it can become more reactive in a different way. She lives with the trine every day, but during this year of her life, there was something wrong with that trine. The trine wasn't operating in a quote good way. There was something wrong with it. That's all I can say. There was something wrong with it. Her love nature was just off this year. Um, Venus rules Gypsy because she's a Libra rising, but it can also just rule women as well. And so it could something suddenly happen to her mum, something suddenly happen to Gypsy's femininity again if it was a very self-directed year with that new moon and big changes happening to her life, this could just be there was something like catastrophically new about her femininity, which we can kind of, concede with the fact that she left the house and kind of probably felt like an adult for the first time in her life. And this is also a chart that has no air in it. And so charts without air are going to be, they have difficulty remaining objective because air is about mental processes, difficulty remaining objective and only interested in their own perspective. Um, so again, this is a year very much concerned with Gypsy's immersion into the world as a new woman, but there was no there was no objectivity about how she was going to achieve that. This was just again, it was like a nuclear bomb. It was just massive. And with it all being all the there's low Earth, so she only had the Pluto in. This is the only planet she has in Earth. So this is a predominantly water and fire chart, which is about water and fire, kind of about instinct and feeling. This was so kind of. I don't want to say it wasn't planned because we know that it was planned, but it's the way she was feeling this year and the kind of the spark that she had regarding her life journey was much more instinctual than she's used to. And again, she doesn't have water in her natal chart, so apart from the Pluto, the lack of water, and then suddenly having a chart that's kind of flooded with water in a lot of ways. Venus and Mercury in Cancer, Neptune and Pisces, Saturn and Mars in Scorpio. She's not used to this much water. There was more feeling than she was used to this year going on. And then I just kind of wanted to talk about the solar arcs because, like, I was thinking I wasn't really like feeling very good today. And the solar energy about looking at, all of this, the solar return and the solar arcs made me feel a bit better. So solar arcs, um, they're a predictive technique of progressing each planet by the same speed as the sun. It's a very advanced technique. I can't even begin to explain it because I'm kind of just I weave them into my analysis, but I'm not too concerned with them unless they reiterate the larger kind of scale events that are happening in the astrology. Um, she did have she had Uranus equals Saturn. And so the way solar arcs work, weaved into analysis, is that they act like a transit in a way, in the sense that they bring very tangible results. Transits cause kind of like a stir in your life. They cause events to happen. Progressions are more internal changes, and when progressions and transits meet, there's a change internally and externally. If it's just transits, it can just be a circumstantial kind of thing. Progressions only, it can just be a slight shift in the personality, kind of like a maturation process, or like kind of more individuation and progressing in life. But when they meet together, there are big changes in the life and the personality. Solar arcs act like transits. They're more they're active for a shorter amount of time, and they're more potent in a way. Um, and so these are the notes I have literally written down from one of my solar arc books. When Uranus equals Saturn or Saturn equals Uranus, again, these aren't my conclusions. This is directly out of a book and apply it to Gypsy's story because it's really fascinating. Pep up for ambition, exciting the status quo into a new development, a jolt to consider freedom, separation. And this arc would have been active from February 2015. Just his mum died in June 2015. Solar arcs are active for 6 months before, 6 months after. Typically, some astrologers go up to a year. I kind of just stick to 6 months. And she also had Uranus equals Sun. So she has two Uranus solar arcs this year. Uranus equals Sun, again, directly out of my book. Independence, revolutionary spirit, being oneself and getting away with it. Intensified feeling of ego, aggrandizement, excited state in relationship, possible breakup. And then she also had Moon equals Venus, and directly out of my book. Home and sensitivity, love and sensitivity, grace, good social reception, cooperation. And so I wanted to talk about some transits, but I don't want to get too carried away. And I don't want to actually write it down. I can't be bothered. Um, from April 2014 until November 2015, so remember her mum died June 2015, she was experiencing her opposition from Neptune and Pisces, transiting Neptune and Pisces opposite Venus and Mars in her natal chart. And so that is her relationship axis for one, but Venus is also her, what she values, and what she's doing. Mars is about what you're doing. And so when Neptune is in hard aspect to any planet, it's going to confuse those planets. It's going to, again, in opposition, it's going to come out in a relationship. She was confused about herself and her place in relationships for this year and a half time span. And then immediately, she had an honorary hit of Saturn squaring the conjunction between her Venus and Mars. She had an honorary hit of that on the 15th of March in 2015, but didn't have the mathematical first hit until late November of 2015. This would have when she was in prison or jail or whatever. I didn't write down when she was sentenced or anything like that. So she immediately went from being like delusional in love, feeling lost in love, feeling lost in the world in a good or bad way. Again, there's no good or bad when it comes to Neptune. It's all kind of just this kind of cloud of confusion, to then just being like smacked with this reality factor of the Saturn squaring them. And, again, the opposition from Neptune to these planets, it was worked out in relationships. When it's just transiting square, this is something that's like coming from within you, or like this isn't relationships, this is just the world happening to you, or like just this weird kind of like sense of urgency that you're suddenly experiencing. So she went from feeling like very much kind of just lost in these relationships. Again, love relationships, potentially, probably the relationship with her mum, yeah, things like that. So just kind of feeling very idealistic around relationships and relating, to then just being, it's just like, it's this huge reality factor of just being slapped across the face. And this would have hit when she was in prison. So yeah, it's kind of like she was experiencing this huge kind of like, I want to say rush, like this huge rush throughout, the beginning of 2015, like this huge rush, excitement, getting ready to kind of go out there in the world. and experience it in a way, and then that, the nuclear bomb essentially conjunct her fourth house cusp, just tearing everything apart, being so melodramatic, um, everything just kind of, going to shit in a certain way, and being kind of blind to that, and then the reality only settling in after she's in prison. And she did experience Mercury, Venus retrograde conjunct her Mercury in July of 2015, and it's stationed direct opposite her moon in September of 2015. And I wonder, so it essentially went from this Venus retrograde, kind of went from here, retrograded, and then stationed direct opposite her moon. Um, and again, Venus rules her, but it's transiting Venus, which has to do with your value and whatnot. But again, her being ruled by Venus, she was very personally attached to this retrograde. Retrogrades have to do with reflection and going over certain things. And so, sorry, my kid is crying. I'm really distracted. And so this Venus retrograde was kind of her reflecting on her life. I don't even think when it's stationed opposite direct her moon, I don't think she felt guilty about it. But that was the first time in September, so kind of before the first mathematical hit of her transiting Saturn squaring her natal Venus-Mars conjunction. I don't think she felt necessarily guilty, but this was a real kind of um, realization for her that things didn't really need to be this way, and she could have handled things very differently. Again, I don't think she felt guilty, but I don't think she had any kind of sense of reflection until September. Um, at the earliest, I would say. So from July, August, those first 2 months, she was still kind of clouded regarding everything that happened, and it wasn't until a few months after the fact that she began to kind of realize that she probably actually did something wrong, or whatever. Anyways, so I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Yeah, sorry about being distracted and stuff. Again, not in the best mood. This is kind of why I feel more comfortable talking about like criminals charts, because again, I don't need to be like super precise with it. Not that it says much about my skill, but it's just I can kind of, 'cause this is still practice for me talking on camera. I can kind of just like free will it a bit more, and not feel so bad if I get something wrong, or feel so bad if I choose the wrong words or anything like that. But yeah, Gypsy Rose Blanchard, everyone, let me know what you think about her chart. If you come across this video and you want to, kind of, correct me or give me some feedback or anything like that. Again, personally, I don't like her, but just because I said negative things about her doesn't mean that I'm, picking on her chart in any particular way. I wanted this to be a constructive conversation about her chart. Anyways, I gotta go. All right, see ya.